My best friend had been secretly married for 3 years. Yet she bragged about her amazing husband to me every single day. She always said her husband was incredibly attentive. He would cook for her in the middle of the night, keep track of her period, and cancel important meetings just to be with her whenever she felt down. I used to tell her how lucky she was. Meanwhile, my own husband, Ethan, was always too busy for me. Until the day I had a miscarriage. I couldn't reach Ethan. I couldn't reach my parents either. In the end, the person who showed up at the hospital to sign my emergency admission papers was my best friend, Serena. She rushed into the ward, signing her name on the guarantor line. As I stared at the signature on the carbon copy, my heart sank. I knew that handwriting all too well. It was identical to my husband's. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. But after I was discharged, I went to Serena's apartment to pick up a bag I had left behind. While looking for it, I found a pregnancy photo shoot tucked away in a drawer. In the photo, my parents were sitting right next to her, and Ethan's hand was resting gently on her swollen belly. On the back of the photo, a line was written in that same handwriting. Finally, a complete family. It turned out that all these years, Serena wasn't bragging about her own happiness. She was bragging about the love my husband was giving her. My most trusted best friend, my beloved husband, and even the parents who gave birth to me, they had all aligned against me long ago. At that moment, I finally realized something. I hadn't just lost a baby. I had lost the entire life I spent 8 years building with my own hands. I went home clutching the photo. The entire drive back, every single word Serena had ever said to me kept flashing through my mind. She once told me that when she had bad cramps, her husband would get up in the middle of the night to brew her hot ginger tea. On that exact night, I was curling up in pain in my own bed, calling Ethan. He told me he was at a business dinner and couldn't make it home. She said when she had a high fever, her husband stayed up all night watching over her until his eyes were bloodshot. On that exact day, my stomach pain was so bad I couldn't even stand. I texted Ethan, and he only replied, "Make sure to take some pills." She said when she was in a bad mood, her husband canceled his meetings to take her to the beach. That day was my birthday. Ethan had promised to take me out for dinner, but at the last minute, he texted saying something came up at the office and told me to eat the cake by myself. Then Serena called me, her voice dripping with sweet vanity. "Chloe, my husband just took me out for dinner. Now he's insisting on taking me to the beach for the night breeze. It's so annoying." Back then, I actually laughed and said, "Well, that's a happy problem." Looking back, every single word felt like a brutal slap to my face. Ethan wasn't too busy. He just gave all his time to her. I was sitting on the couch, my hand trembling as I held the photo, when my phone suddenly rang. The caller ID showed, Ethan. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before swiping to answer. "Chloe?" His voice was as gentle as always, filled with that comforting tone he always used. "Why didn't you call me when you woke up? I just got out of a meeting and saw the notification from the hospital." I said nothing. He paused, his tone softening even more. "I'm so sorry, babe. My phone was on silent during the presentation, so I missed your calls. I contacted your parents too. They said they were on their way to visit an old friend and didn't check their phones. How are you feeling? What did the doctor say? Does your stomach still hurt? I had the housekeeper make some soup for you. I'll be home to keep you company later, okay?" He asked so many detailed questions, sounding like the most caring husband in the world. If I didn't have this photo in my hand, I would have believed him. I asked quietly, "Ethan, were you really that busy today?" There was a brief silence on the other end. Then he let out a soft laugh. "Of course I was. Why are you asking all of a sudden? Are you just feeling down because of the miscarriage? Don't overthink things, Chloe. Be a good girl and don't overanalyze. I'll be home soon." I closed my eyes. "Okay." He sounded relieved. "Good girl. Wait for me." After the call ended, the living room fell into a suffocating silence. I slowly put my phone down as more details flooded my brain. I remembered finding a faint trace of baby powder scent on Ethan's shirt. I remembered seeing a tiny toy car in the back seat of his car. I remembered how he would occasionally step out to the balcony to answer calls, keeping his voice incredibly low. Whenever I asked, he would always say it was just a client. And I believed him, because I never had a reason to doubt him. And I certainly never expected Serena to be the one to stab me in the back. I put the pregnancy photo in my bag and drove to my parents' house. My mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner. When she saw me walk in, she froze for a second, then quickly walked over. "Chloe, why are you running around right after being discharged? Do you not care about your health?" I looked at her, suddenly wanting to laugh. Yesterday, when I was lying outside the operating room waiting for someone to sign my papers, her phone was dead. Now she suddenly cared about my health. I didn't answer her. I just threw the photo onto the dining table. "Mom, explain this." Her face went completely pale. My dad, who was reading the tablet on the couch, looked up. The moment his eyes hit the photo, his eyebrows knitted tightly. The living room went dead silent. My mom reached out to grab the photo, trying to hide it. Where did you find this? That doesn't matter. I stared at her. I asked you, what is this? Her lips trembled, but she couldn't find her words. My dad spoke up with a cold, stern face. You just had a miscarriage. Your emotions are unstable. Don't start imagining things over an old photo. An old photo. So it was true. I looked at him, my voice tight. When was this taken? No one answered. I asked again, louder. When was this taken? This time my mom whispered, 3 years ago. My fingers shook, my nails digging deep into my palms. 3 years ago. Which meant that back when I knew absolutely nothing, they were already standing together, taking a happy family portrait. My throat felt tight. You guys knew all along? My mom avoided my gaze. But my dad didn't even bother to deny it anymore. Yes, we knew. Serena was pregnant back then, and it wasn't easy for her to handle it alone. Ethan was worried, and we couldn't just turn our backs on her. It felt like a physical blow to my face. My ears were ringing. So you went to her prenatal checkups, took family photos with her, and played happy family? My mom lost her patience. Chloe, don't make it sound so ugly. You know what kind of person Serena is. She has always been sweet and helpful. She has taken care of us more than you have these past few years. She is your best friend. What's wrong with us looking out for her a little? I let out a bitter laugh. My best friend. She sounds more like your real daughter. My mom's face darkened. Watch your attitude, Chloe. I looked at them, my chest aching. Then what about me? Who am I to you guys? At that, my mom's eyes flickered with a hint of guilt. But her next words completely froze my heart. Chloe, we did this for your own good. You and Ethan have been married for years. You got pregnant once before, but you couldn't keep it. The doctor said back then that it would be extremely difficult for you to conceive again. I froze. That first miscarriage was my deepest wound. In our 5th year of marriage, I had gotten pregnant. I was so happy I couldn't sleep all night. Ethan had held me close, promising he would take care of us forever. But at 3 months, the heartbeat stopped. Ethan needs an heir, my mom whispered. A man like him can't go without a child forever. Since Serena gave birth to a boy, and he's Ethan's blood, we couldn't just pretend he doesn't exist. I stared at her, my vision blurring. So in your eyes, my miscarriage was just my own failure, but her giving birth is a triumph. That's not what I meant, my mom frowned. Why are you being so dramatic? My dad put his tablet down, his voice cold and commanding. Enough. You weren't supposed to find out about this anyway. Ethan was right. You've been emotionally unstable lately. Ethan is a great provider. Men make mistakes, but as long as he keeps coming home to you, you should learn to keep one eye shut. I looked at him, my heart turning to ice. Coming home? To which home? Silence filled the room. My mom softened her tone after a moment. Chloe, you are his legal wife. No one can take that away from you. No matter what Serena did, she only gave him a child. If you're smart, you'll drop this. Don't make a scene and make everyone look bad. I stood there, looking at the 2 people who had raised me, feeling like they were complete strangers. Serena was my best friend, but she was also their adopted darling. All these years, she had the keys to my house, went shopping with my mom, took my dad to his doctor appointments, and spent every holiday with us. I thought it was because she loved me. Now I realized she was slowly pushing me out of my own life, inch by inch, until my own parents didn't even have a place for me anymore. I bent down, snatched the photo back, and shoved it into my bag. My mom instinctively reached out. Where are you going? I looked up at her. To find Ethan. My mom's face changed, and she quickly grabbed my arm. Don't do this, Chloe. Serena is still recovering with the baby. I shook her hand off violently. She has a baby, so I deserve to lose mine? Is that it? My mom froze. I didn't look back as I walked out the door. My dad's booming voice echoed from behind me. Chloe Bennett. If you ruin this marriage today, you are the only one who will regret it. I didn't stop. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sun was blindingly bright. But I felt absolutely no warmth. The place I thought would always protect me had never belonged to me in the first place. Serena's current apartment was located in a luxury high-rise, not far from Ethan's company. I had been there once before. She told me it belonged to a friend and she was just staying there temporarily. What a joke. It wasn't a temporary stay. It was a love nest he bought for her. The front door wasn't fully closed, and I could hear a child's laughter coming from inside. I stood at the door, peering through the crack. Ethan was sitting on the plush carpet, holding building blocks, helping a little boy build a castle. Serena was sitting on the couch, peeling an apple. The warm sunlight streamed in, bathing them in a picture-perfect glow. They looked like a real family. The little boy suddenly looked up and spotted me standing at the door. He blinked, then grabbed his toys and ran to Ethan on his chubby little legs. Daddy, he called out in a sweet childish voice. Ethan looked up. The moment his eyes met mine, the smile on his face completely froze. I stood there, my feet feeling like they were glued to the floor. Daddy. The word felt like a physical blade plunged straight into my chest. Ethan had promised me. After my last miscarriage, when the doctor said my uterus was severely damaged and another pregnancy would be highly risky, I had sobbed in his arms. He had held me, kissing my forehead over and over, saying, "It's okay, Chloe. We don't need kids. I only need you." But now he was kneeling in front of another woman's child, listening to him call him daddy. Every single word he had ever said to me was a lie. When I pushed the door open, everyone in the room stood up. Serena's face drained of color, and she almost dropped the paring knife. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" I didn't even look at her. My eyes were locked on Ethan. "Aren't you going to explain this?" Ethan remained silent for a few seconds. He walked toward me, keeping his voice low. "Let's talk outside." I took a step back, avoiding his reach. "We talk here." The little boy was frightened by the cold atmosphere. He grabbed Ethan's trousers, looking at me with wide, scared eyes. "Daddy, who is she?" No one answered him. I walked further into the room, staring at the boy's face. His eyes and brow looked exactly like Ethan's. My chest tightened painfully. Before I could say anything, the boy suddenly took a step back in fear. He stepped too fast, tripped over a loose toy block, and fell backward onto the carpet. "Wah!" The boy immediately burst into tears. Serena gasped and rushed over, pulling him into her arms. "Leo, are you okay? Where does it hurt?" The boy sobbed hysterically, burying his face in Serena's neck while pointing a trembling finger at me. "She pushed me, the mean lady pushed me." I froze. I didn't touch him. My voice was quiet, but it rang clearly in the room. But no one was listening to me. Serena hugged the boy tight, her eyes red as if her heart was breaking. "Chloe, if you have a problem, take it out on me. Leo is just a child." The boy cried louder, reaching his arms out to Ethan. "Daddy, it hurts." Ethan's expression instantly darkened. He took the boy from Serena's arms, checking his knees. There was a tiny red scrape on his knee. Ethan's frown deepened. When he looked up at me, his eyes were filled with suppressed anger. "Chloe, control yourself." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "I didn't do anything." Ethan pressed his lips together, his voice deep and cold. "A child wouldn't lie about something like this." Those words felt like a bucket of ice water poured over my head. My throat burned. "So you believe him over me?" He didn't answer. He just held the boy and instinctively stepped closer to Serena, shielding her. That tiny movement hurt more than any words ever could. It was instinct. His instinct was to protect them and guard against me. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. I was his wife. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "The day I had my miscarriage, I called you dozens of times. Where were you?" His face went pale. "Chloe, let's talk about this when we get home." "Home?" I whispered. "Which home?" The boy was still whimpering, his small hands clutching Ethan's shirt. "Daddy, I'm scared." Ethan patted his back, his voice incredibly gentle. "It's okay. Daddy's here." Serena looked at me with tearful eyes, looking like the ultimate victim. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Blame me, but please don't take it out on Leo. He doesn't know anything." I looked at her, feeling utterly disgusted. "He doesn't know anything, but you do." Her lips trembled. "I didn't mean to." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with exhaustion and impatience. "Chloe, Leo is already hurt. Stop making a scene." Making a scene. Again, those words. The first time I lost a baby, he said I was being too emotional. Now, when I caught him red-handed with his secret family, he still accused me of making a scene. It seemed that as long as I expressed pain, as long as I demanded answers, I was the one in the wrong. I looked down at my hands. They were empty. I had no baby, and I had no home. I turned around and walked out. Ethan put the boy down and chased after me, grabbing my wrist. "I'll drive you back." I slowly but firmly pried his fingers off my arm. "Don't touch me." His hand went stiff. I didn't give him another look. I walked straight out of the apartment. Behind me, the boy's loud cries and Serena's soothing voice echoed down the hallway. As the elevator doors slowly shut, tears finally spilled over. The most painful part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that even though you still loved him, he wouldn't hesitate for a single second to choose them over you. By the time I got back to our apartment, the sky was pitch black. Ethan returned 30 minutes later. He walked in with his suit jacket draped over his arm, his face etched with exhaustion. He looked like a man who had just finished consoling his mistress and child, only to drag himself back to deal with his wife. He stood by the door, staring at me for a few seconds before saying, "Chloe, we need to talk." He walked over and sat across from me. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Leo is indeed my son." Even though I already knew, hearing it from his mouth felt like another heavy blow. My fingertips were icy. "Since when?" Ethan closed his eyes. "After your first miscarriage." My breathing caught. "You couldn't sleep back then, and your mental state was terrible." The doctor said you needed complete rest. Meanwhile, my company was going through a crisis, and I was running myself ragged. Serena was helping out by taking care of your parents, and she'd occasionally bring food to our place. One night, I got completely wasted. She drove me back. And then, he spoke slowly, his voice hoarse. I wanted to fix things before telling you, but then, she got pregnant. I looked at him and let out a hollow laugh. So you decided to play the loving husband to me while playing dad to her child? Ethan frowned, looking pained. I never wanted things to turn out like this. I never had any intention of divorcing you, Chloe. How pathetic. He claimed to love me while having a child with another woman. He claimed he didn't want a divorce while turning my entire life into a running joke. I asked quietly, and what about Serena? He paused. She is my responsibility. Responsibility? I looked at him. You went to her appointments, raised her kid, and you were with her the exact day I lost my baby. You call that responsibility? A flash of guilt crossed Ethan's eyes. Leo had a sudden high fever that day. I couldn't leave. You couldn't leave, I repeated, my throat burning. So you ignored all my calls. So my baby died alone because you couldn't leave. Is that it? Ethan's face turned white. Chloe, I know I messed up. I'm sorry. But ever since you lost the baby, you've been so unstable. You don't sleep, you overthink everything, and you're always on edge. I was exhausted too. By the end of his sentence, his voice carried a hint of pent-up resentment. As if he was the victim here. I was suffocating between the office and trying to manage both of you. I wanted to take care of you, but I also had to handle things on her end. You didn't give me any room to breathe. I looked at him, feeling my love for him completely die. To him, my grief after losing our baby wasn't pain. It was just an annoyance. I stood up, my voice dead calm. Ethan, let's get a divorce. He snapped his head up. I told you. I am not divorcing you. Why? I looked at him. Because you love me? Or because you can't bear to lose this perfect setup where you get to keep both of us? He froze, unable to utter a single word. Just then his phone buzzed. It was my mother. He picked it up, and my mom's frantic voice echoed through the speaker. Ethan, get over here quick. Leo won't stop crying. And Serena is having a panic attack. Ethan didn't even look at me. He grabbed his car keys and bolted out the door. The moment the door slammed shut, the living room fell silent again. I stood there for a long time. When your heart truly breaks, you don't scream or cry. You just become very, very quiet. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out my suitcase. I packed my clothes, my documents, and my credit cards. Dragging my suitcase to the front door, I took one last look at the place I had lived in for 8 years. Everything looked exactly the same. But I knew I couldn't stay here for another second. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the elevator. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Asterisk, Leo is in bad shape. I might not make it back tonight. Asterisk. Asterisk, Chloe, don't overthink. We'll talk when I get back. Asterisk. I stared at the message for a long time, then locked my screen. The night wind was freezing. I dragged my suitcase into the dark, never looking back. The hotel room on the 42nd floor of the St. Regis was silent, smelling of dry linen, polished walnut, and rain. I did not turn on the chandelier. I sat on the edge of the king-sized mattress. In the dark, watching the headlights of Manhattan move like slow, luminous veins. Through the sleep below, my body still carried the hollow, throbbing ache of the surgery. My abdomen felt bruised, my lower back stiff, but my mind had never been sharper. It was as if the fever that had clouded my judgment for 8 years had finally broken, leaving behind a cold, crystalline wasteland. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Ethan. Leo's fever finally broke. I'm exhausted. Going to sleep for a couple of hours on Serena's couch. Chloe, please don't let your anger poison 8 years of memories. We will fix this when I wake up. I didn't reply. I locked the screen, placed the phone face down, and opened my laptop. People often forget who built the foundation of a house once the roof is gilded. When Ethan and I married 8 years ago, Vance Logistics was a four-man dispatch office operating out of a damp warehouse in Long Island City. It was my father's former business partner who gave Ethan his first commercial freight line. It was my architectural drafting firm that designed the automated sorting hubs that allowed Vance Logistics to scale into an $800 million supply chain titan. Under our original prenuptial agreement, drafted by an attorney my father had recommended, marital property was strictly delineated, except for one crucial clause. Any intellectual property, commercial patents, and equity acquired through the direct capitalization of either spouse remained the sole, indivisible asset of the contributing party. For 8 years, I had let Ethan manage the executive board while I held 62% of the underlying holding company's voting shares in a private trust under my maiden name, the Bennett Capital Trust. He had forgotten. Or perhaps, in his arrogant assumption of my eternal Self-sacrificing devotion. He had convinced himself that my assets were merely his birthright. At 7 a.m., I dialed a private number. The call connected on the second ring. Chloe. The voice was deep, cultured, and raspy with age. I saw your name on the hospital registry yesterday. I was about to call. Arthur Vance, not Ethan's father, but his estranged paternal uncle, the former senior partner at Vance, Sterling and Croft, whom Ethan had pushed off the board 5 years ago. Uncle Arthur, I said, my voice entirely level. I need the best forensic accounting team in the tri-state area. And I need you to file a petition for absolute dissolution of marriage by noon. A pause stretched across the line, heavy and calculating. Is there cause? Arthur asked quietly. Adultery, I replied. Fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. Embezzlement from the holding trust. And 3 years of systematic domestic deception. Arthur let out a low, grim breath. I'll be at your hotel in 45 minutes. Bring the ledgers. When Arthur arrived, flanked by 2 junior partners carrying heavy leather briefcases, I had already organized the preliminary digital statements on the glass desk. Arthur sat in the armchair, wearing a tailored 3-piece charcoal suit, his silver hair immaculate. He set his gold wire-rimmed spectacles on his nose and began flipping through the bank statements I had pulled from our private family accounts. As the pages turned, the quiet in the room became terrifying. He was not even subtle, Arthur muttered, tapping a red pen against a transaction dated 14 months prior. Look at this. A wire transfer of $1.2 million from the Vance Holdings operational reserve to Seraphim Shell LLC. What is Seraphim Shell? I asked, sipping black coffee that tasted of ash. A domestic holding company registered in Delaware. The junior associate, a sharp woman named Rachel, answered. The sole beneficial owner is Serena Miller. The registered address is the luxury penthouse on 57th Street. She pulled up a fresh document on her tablet. Over the last 36 months, Ethan transferred $4,600,000 into this entity. He purchased the penthouse in full, leased a 2023 Porsche Cayenne under the corporate account, and established an educational trust fund for the minor child, Leo Vance, seeded with $2 million in municipal bonds. $4.6 million. During that exact period, my mother had called me every 3 months, complaining that the roof of their suburban home in Westchester was leaking, asking me for $15,000 for repairs because Ethan was under so much financial pressure at the company. During that exact period, Ethan had looked at me across our breakfast table and said, Chloe, we should delay replacing the HVAC system in the house this winter. Cash flow is tight with the new terminal expansion. I had worn the same winter coat for 3 seasons because I thought my husband was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. There's more, Rachel said hesitantly, glancing up at Arthur before meeting my eyes. Say it, I commanded. Rachel turned the tablet toward me. It displayed the private medical billing logs from the Mount Sinai Fertility Center from 2 years ago. When you were undergoing hormonal therapy for your second pregnancy, Rachel said softly, Ethan was paying for a private reproductive concierge service for Serena. The doctor who oversaw your hormone protocol was the same physician who delivered Leo. My heart did not race. It did not break. It turned into a block of black basalt. The doctor was Dr. Robert Sterling, I said, recognizing the signature on the medical portal. Yes, Rachel replied. He received a consulting fee of $250,000 from Seraphim Shell 3 weeks before your first miscarriage. The room seemed to lose all its oxygen. The first miscarriage. 5 years ago, at 3 months, my hormone levels had plummeted overnight. Dr. Sterling had looked at me with deep, theatrical sympathy and said, Mrs. Vance, your uterine lining is simply too hostile. Your body rejected the fetus. You need to accept that you may never carry a child to term. I had spent 2 years in therapy, believing my own biology had murdered my child. I looked at Arthur. Can you subpoena Sterling's private consultation notes? I'll have a federal discovery order on his desk before the stock market closes. Today, Arthur said, his eyes burning with an ancient cold fury. If that butcher altered your dosage to protect Ethan's secret heir, he won't just lose his license, Chloe. He'll die in a federal penitentiary. I stood up from the desk, smoothed the creases of my dark woolen trousers and looked out the window. Freeze the accounts, Arthur, I said. Every single line of credit tied to Vance Logistics, Seraphim Shell, and the family estate. Cut the cards. Cancel the commercial insurance on the 57th Street property. And notify the board of directors that the primary shareholder will be attending the emergency fiscal meeting at 4 o'clock. At 10 in the morning, my phone rang 24 times in succession. When I finally swiped the screen to answer, my mother's voice shrieked so loudly that Arthur, sitting 5 feet away, frowned in disgust. Chloe, What did you do? My mother screamed, her voice bordering on hyperventilation. I just went to the country club to pay for your father's golf membership, and the cashier told me the card was declined. Then the bank manager called saying the mortgage auto debit on our house failed. I held the phone slightly away from my ear. The accounts are frozen, Mother. Are you insane? She roared. You freeze your own parents' cards because of a spat with your husband. Your father has high blood pressure. He's having chest pains right now. If anything happens to him, it's on your head. The mortgage on the Westchester house is $8,500 a month. I said, my voice conversational and flat. For 7 years, that mortgage was paid directly from my personal trust account, not Ethan's. Mine. My mother choked on her breath for a second before doubling down. You are our daughter. It is your duty to provide for us. Ethan was right, you've become completely unhinged since you lost the baby. Serena came over this morning in tears, telling us how you terrified poor little Leo. The child won't eat. Serena is at your house? I asked. Of course she is, my mother snapped proudly. She brought your father his heart medication and cooked us breakfast. She is more of a daughter than you ever were. If you had an ounce of decency, you'd transfer $50,000 to our account right now, go to Serena's apartment, and apologize to Ethan on your knees. A low, humorless laugh slipped past my lips. Mother, I said quietly. What? The deed to the Westchester house is registered under the Bennett Capital Trust, I said, every word dropping like a lead weight into the silence of the line. I bought the property from the bank when father went bankrupt in 2017. You and father are listed as permissive tenants under a revocable occupancy agreement. There was an immediate, terrifying pause on the other end. What are you saying? My mother stammered, the rage draining from her voice, replaced by the first creeping tendril of panic. I'm saying that you have 48 hours to vacate the premises, I said. At noon on Thursday, the county sheriff will arrive to change the locks. You can take your clothes, your jewelry, and your precious guest Serena. But if a single piece of my grandmother's antique furniture is missing from the parlor, I will file grand larceny charges with the district attorney. Chloe, no. You can't do this to your own parents. We gave you life. You gave me life, I replied. And then you spent 3 years helping another woman steal it. Give the spare bedroom to Leo, Mother. Since you love him so much, I'm sure Ethan will be happy to buy you a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens once his assets are liquidated. I ended the call. I did not block her number. I simply turned off the ringer, slid the phone into my handbag, and turned to Arthur. Let's go to the office. The headquarters of Vance Logistics occupied the top 3 floors of a steel and glass skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. At 3:45 p.m., the executive conference room on the 38th floor was filled with 22 board members, institutional investors, and senior logistics partners. Ethan sat at the head of the long walnut table, looking haggard. He wore a crisp white shirt, but his tie was slightly askew, his eyes shadowed by dark circles. Beside him sat his chief financial officer, Marcus Vance, his younger cousin, reviewing the third-quarter earnings report. The expansion into the Savannah port requires an immediate $20 million capital injection, Ethan was saying, clicking through a slide deck. We'll draw the initial $5 million from the primary trust reserves. As usual. The heavy double-frosted glass doors of the boardroom swung open without a knock. Every head turned. I walked in. I was not wearing the soft, oversized woolen cardigans I had worn during my pregnancy. I wore a tailored black tuxedo dress by Saint Laurent, a sharp 3-inch heel, and my hair pulled back into an immaculate, severe chignon. Flanking me were Arthur Vance, for senior forensic accountants from Deloitte, and 2 armed federal marshals carrying manila boxes stamped with court seals. Ethan stood up so fast his leather executive chair rolled back, slamming into the glass wall behind him. Chloe. His voice cracked. What is the meaning of this? This is an executive board meeting. You can't just barge in here with. Sit down, Ethan. Arthur Vance's voice thundered across the room. The board members gasped. Arthur had not stepped foot in this building in 5 years. To see him flanked by federal marshals sent an immediate, violent wave of panic through the room. Arthur. Ethan stammered, looking between his uncle and me, his face turning an ashen gray. What is this? I walked to the head of the table, stopping directly opposite Ethan. I placed my black leather portfolio flat on the polished wood. For the record, I said, my voice projecting clearly into the microphone at the center of the console. My name is Chloe Bennett Vance. I am the sole trustee and holder of 62% of the voting common stock of Vance Logistics Holdings LLC. Murmurs erupted like gunfire around the table. 2 private equity delegates from Boston sat up straight, instantly checking They're digital tablets. Under Section 12 of the corporate charter, I continued, sliding an official court injunction across the table. I have executed an immediate, unilateral removal of Ethan Vance from the office of Chief Executive Officer for gross fiduciary negligence, corporate embezzlement, and the unlawful diversion of corporate reserves to personal shell companies. Chloe, stop this. Ethan roared, his hands slamming onto the table, his composure shattering entirely. You've lost your mind. You're making a scene. Because of our personal marital issues. Gentlemen, ignore her. My wife has had an emotional breakdown following a medical procedure. Here is the forensic audit, Arthur interrupted, gesturing to the marshals. The marshals began placing thick, wire-bound dossiers in front of every single board member. Page 4, Arthur announced, his voice ringing with cold authority. A $4 million wire transfer to Seraphim Shell LLC, an entity registered to Ethan's mistress. Page 9, corporate credit cards used to pay $36,000 in private nursery tuition for an illegitimate child. Page 14, the unauthorized pledging of the company's Savannah operating assets as personal collateral for a private real estate loan. The lead institutional investor, an older man named Harrison Vance, flipped through the pages, his face turning from shock to utter murderous rage. He looked up at Ethan. Ethan, is this true? Harrison, listen to me. Ethan pleaded, sweat breaking out across his forehead, drenching his collar. The transfers they were related to an independent consulting agreement. I was going to explain it at the annual meeting. The annual meeting is cancelled, I said. I picked up the executive gavel resting on the central podium, the heavy brass gavel I had gifted Ethan on the day the company went public 5 years ago. I brought it down once against the walnut-sounding block. Bang! Ethan Vance is dismissed, I said. His security clearance has been revoked. His corporate email has been deleted from the central server. And the forensic audit has been transmitted directly to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Manhattan District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit. Ethan stared at me, his mouth hung open, his hands trembling so violently that he had to grip the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. Chloe, he whispered, the arrogance completely gone, replaced by the pathetic, naked terror of a man who had realized that the ground beneath his feet had never belonged to him. You can't do this to me. I built this company. I gave you my life. You built nothing, Ethan, I said, looking him in the eye without a flicker of emotion. You were just the handsome clerk I hired to sign the shipping manifests, and your contract has been terminated. I turned to the 2 security guards waiting by the door. Escort the former CEO off the premises. If he touches a single computer terminal, have the marshals arrest him for corporate trespass. The guards moved in. They took Ethan by his arms. He didn't fight them. He let them drag him toward the glass doors, his feet sliding uselessly across the marble floor, his eyes locked onto mine until the doors clicked shut. The boardroom fell into an absolute, breathless hush. I sat down in the executive leather chair at the head of the table. I smoothed my skirt, looked at the remaining 21 terrified directors, and smiled. Now, gentlemen, I said, let's discuss the third quarter dividend restructuring. When Ethan was thrown out of the building onto the wet pavement of Lexington Avenue, his phone was buzzing continuously in his pocket. Reporters from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal were already arriving, having received the SEC filing 30 minutes prior. Cameras flashed in his face. Microphones were shoved toward his trembling lips. Mr. Vance, is it true you embezzled $4 million from the holding trust? Mr. Vance, can you comment on the fraud allegations filed by the majority shareholder? Ethan shielded his face with his suit jacket, stumbling down the street like a wounded dog, finally hailing a yellow cab with the last $20 bill in his wallet. 57th Street, he choked out, collapsing into the back seat. When he arrived at the luxury high-rise, he didn't even wait for the elevator doorman. He took the lift to the 44th floor, slamming his palm against the fingerprint scanner of the penthouse door. The scanner flashed red. Access denied. What? Ethan screamed, pounding his fist against the solid oak door. Serena, open the damn door. Serena. The door swung open after 2 agonizing minutes. Serena stood in the hallway, wearing a silk robe, her hair disheveled, holding an iPhone to her ear. When she saw Ethan's pale, sweat-soaked face, her expression wasn't one of tender comfort. It was tight, panicked, and furious. Ethan, she hissed, pulling him inside and slamming the door. Why were the private cards declined at the nursery today? I went to pick up Leo's organic formula, and the cashier told me the account was locked. And your mother called me screaming that Chloe is evicting them from the house. Ethan staggered into the living room, collapsing onto the velvet sofa, his head in his hands. It's over, Serena, he whispered, his voice cracking. Chloe took the company. She froze the trust. The SEC is opening an investigation. Serena froze in the center of the Persian rug. The sweet, delicate, submissive woman who had spent 3 years whispering that she only wanted his love, that she didn't care about money, that she just wanted a family vanished. Her eyes hardened into 2 cold, calculating slits. What do you mean she took the company? Serena demanded, her voice rising to a shrill screech. You're the CEO. You own the shares. I don't own the shares. Ethan yelled back, lifting his red-rimmed eyes. The voting equity was in her private family trust. I was just the managing director. She took everything, Serena. Everything. Serena took 3 steps back, looking at Ethan as if he were a beggar who had wandered into her living room. Then what about this apartment? She asked, her voice dropping into a dangerous, icy register. What about the $2 million in Leo's trust fund? The forensic team is tracing the transfers, Ethan stammered. They're filing a fraudulent conveyance suit tomorrow. The judge will freeze the Delaware entity. By Friday, we have to move out. We have to find an apartment in New Jersey until this blows over. Move to New Jersey? Serena shrieked, her face twisting in pure, unadulterated disgust. Are you insane? I gave you 3 years of my youth. I had your baby. I lived like a dirty secret in this apartment while you went home to play the doting husband to that barren bitch. Ethan stared at her, stunned. Serena, what are you saying? You told me you loved me. You said we were a real family. A family needs money, you idiot, she screamed. Do you think I let a man 12 years older than me touch me because of your charming personality? Do you think I sat through your boring business complaints because I cared? I did. It because you were the CEO of an $800 million empire. From the hallway, little Leo came toddling out on his chubby legs, clutching a stuffed bear, his eyes wide and frightened by the shouting. Daddy? The boy whimpered. Mommy, why are you yelling? Serena didn't even look at the child. She spun around, grabbed her designer handbag from the credenza, and began frantically stuffing her passport, her jewelry boxes, and her private cash reserves into the leather tote. Where are you going? Ethan lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. Serena turned and slapped him across the face, a sharp, stinging blow that echoed through the high-ceilinged room. Get your filthy hands off me, she hissed. I'm taking Leo to a hotel. Don't you dare contact me until you sort out your legal mess. Serena, that's my son. Ethan wept, falling onto his knees on the rug, clutching at the hem of her robe. You can't take my son. I sacrificed everything for him. I destroyed my marriage for him. Your son. Serena let out a vicious, mocking laugh that cut straight to Ethan's marrow. You pathetic fool. Why don't you check the blood type on Leo's birth certificate against your own medical chart? Leo's father is Julian Brooks, the venture capitalist who introduced me to your company 3 years ago. Ethan's breath died in his throat. The world stopped spinning. And no. Ethan whispered, his voice disintegrating into dust. No, you're lying. He has my eyes, you swore. I needed a fool with an open checkbook to pay for his nursery and my luxury lease while Julian was dealing with his divorce, Serena sneered, yanking her robe from his paralyzed fingers. Thank you for the $4 million, Ethan. It was very generous of you. She scooped up the crying boy, grabbed her luggage, and walked out the front door. The heavy door slammed shut. Ethan sat alone on the floor of the empty penthouse, the silence closing in like a tomb, as the first wail of police sirens began to echo from the street below. On Thursday morning, Arthur Vance walked into my hotel suite carrying a thick, red-stamped confidential medical dossier. I was sitting at the breakfast table, wearing an ivory silk blouse, reviewing the preliminary restructuring proposal for Vance Logistics. The federal marshals executed the search warrant on Dr. Robert Sterling's private clinic yesterday afternoon, Arthur said, laying the file beside my teacup. Sterling broke within 20 minutes of being placed in a holding cell. I opened the folder. Inside were handwritten consultation notes, pharmacy logs, and digital receipts, dating back 6 years. Sterling wasn't just taking consulting fees, Arthur said, his voice trembling with quiet, righteous fury. 5 years ago, during your first pregnancy, Serena provided Sterling with $200,000 in bearer bonds. Sterling intentionally prescribed an incompatible synthetic progestin compound under the label of uterine lining stabilization. My fingers gripped the edge of the paper so hard the heavy bond tore slightly. He poisoned the pregnancy, I whispered. He induced a silent hormonal crash, Arthur confirmed. And during your second pregnancy last month, when you were admitted for mild spotting, Sterling administered a concentrated prostaglandin drip instead of an anti-contraction agent. He told the nursing staff it was a standard saline flush. I closed the file. I looked at the window. The sky over New York was clear today, a vast, brilliant piercing blue that felt cold, sharp, and infinite. Where is Sterling now? I asked. In federal custody at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Arthur said. The United States Attorney has charged him with 20 counts of healthcare fraud, distribution of controlled substances resulting in death, and attempted murder. He has no possibility of bail. And Serena? Arrested at JFK International Airport at 2 a.m, Arthur replied. With a thin, grim smile. She had booked 2 first-class tickets to Dubai under assumed names. The federal marshals seized her luggage, containing $800,000 in untaxed diamonds, and remanded the child to Child Protective Services pending paternity verification. I took a slow, deep breath. The pain in my abdomen was gone. The phantom guilt that had haunted my soul for half a decade, the agonizing, suffocating belief that I was a broken woman who couldn't protect her own children, evaporated into the clean morning air. I was not broken. I had simply survived an 8-year war against a nest of vipers who had mistaken my grace for weakness. Call the press conference for 2 o'clock, Arthur, I said, rising from the table. It's time to close the ledger. The Manhattan Supreme Court building at 60 Center Street was surrounded by 300 reporters, 50 broadcast vans, and a dense crowd of onlookers when the Blacktown car pulled up to the curb. The divorce hearing had taken exactly 42 minutes. Under the terms of the settlement executed by the judge, all assets transferred to Seraphim Shell LLC were recovered and remitted to the Bennett Capital Trust. Ethan Vance was ordered to pay $12 million in compensatory and punitive damages for corporate fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The marriage of 8 years was dissolved with prejudice. I walked down the grand granite steps of the courthouse into the crisp October sunlight. I wore a tailored cream coat, dark sunglasses, and diamond studs at my ears. I walked with my head held high, my spine straight, the wind lifting the dark hair from my shoulders. At the bottom of the steps, standing by the iron perimeter fence, was Ethan. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. His suit was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed, his face gaunt and covered in an untidy, graying beard. He had no car, no assistants, and no lawyers beside him. He stood there shivering in the autumn wind, clutching a torn paper envelope in his shaking hands. When he saw me descend the steps, he broke past the media line, throwing himself forward until 2 private security guards caught him by his shoulders, pinning him 5 feet from me. Chloe, Ethan cried, his voice breaking into a ragged, bleeding sob. Chloe, please, look at me once. I stopped. I gestured for the security guards to hold their positions, but I did not step closer. I took off my sunglasses, looking down at the man I had loved since I was 19 years old. Chloe, Ethan wept, his knees giving out until he was kneeling on the cold concrete sidewalk before 200 flashing cameras. I didn't know. I swear. To God, Chloe, I didn't know about Sterling. I didn't know she poisoned our baby. If I had known, I would have killed her with my bare hands. Tears streamed down his hollow cheeks, dripping onto the concrete. I was an idiot, Chloe. I was poisoned by pride. I thought I was invincible. But without you, I'm nothing. The banks took the car, they took my apartment. My parents are living in a church shelter in Newark, and the SEC is taking my broker's license tomorrow. He lifted his hands toward me, his fingers trembling in desperate supplication. Take me back, Chloe. Let me be your driver. Let me work in the warehouse. I'll scrub the floors of the new hubs. Just let me come home. Please don't leave me in the dark. I looked at him. I searched my heart for anger. I searched for vengeance. I searched for the bitter, burning fury that had kept me awake on the night I dragged my suitcase into the rain. There was nothing. No hatred. No pity. No triumph. Only the vast, magnificent, tranquil silence of a woman who had finally stepped out of a tomb. Ethan, I said softly. He looked up, a wild, pathetic spark of hope flaring in his bloodshot eyes. When I was lying in that hospital bed 2 weeks ago, bleeding through the sheets, I called you 17 times. I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet crowd of journalists. Do you remember what you texted me? Ethan's face turned the color of wet chalk. You told me, make sure to take some pills. Be a good girl and don't overanalyze. I put my sunglasses back on, the dark lenses reflecting the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Be a good boy, Ethan, I said gently. And don't overthink your prison sentence. I stepped past him. The reporters surged forward, their cameras capturing every second of Ethan Vance weeping on the pavement, his forehead pressed against the dirty stone, while I walked toward the waiting car. As the car door closed, the heavy soundproofing sealed out the noise of the city, the flashes of the cameras, and the ghosts of 8 wasted years. The driver looked back through the rearview mirror. Where to, Ms. Bennett? I looked out the window at the wide, open avenue stretching toward the river, where the autumn sun was turning the water into a sheet of pure, unshakable gold. I smiled. To the office, I said. We have an empire to build.